everyone. Welcome back.
Let's get straight into this week's biggest headlines, starting with the high-stakes struggle between ride-sharing apps Uber and Lyft and my home state, California.
Yeah, California courts say Uber needs to classify their drivers as employees instead of freelancers. But of course, that would make it much more expensive for the app and riders like Julia and myself.
Yeah, and if you recall, back in the year 2016, Uber and Lyft temporarily left Austin, Texas over a new background check law, and they only went back to Austin after the law was reversed. In this case, they could do the same thing. We know that Uber and Lyft's future is in jeopardy in California.
Next, imagine if you didn't have to go anywhere because you lived and work on a beautiful tropical beach. Wouldn't that be lovely, Julia?
That would be so nice. I haven't been on a beach in like forever, so
terrible.
I would
Our
love
lives
to
are
do
sad.
That. Yeah.
So now we can. Actually, Bermuda and Barbados are offering visas for remote workers looking for, get this, a change of scenery. That's me.
That's me. That's all of us. See, tourism makes up a huge part of these island countries' economies, but during these prime vacation months, their visitation numbers are zero.
Goose egg. And this could be a great alternative to boost these countries' struggling economies. And it's also great for people like us who are tired of being stuck at home in places like New York City. My God, I'm tired of this place.
And another thing, if you're still at home, like most of us, Netflix is trying a new feature, a shuffle button.
Yeah, I know a few people who would need this. So basically, if you're bored and you don't know what to watch, you could hit play something and Netflix will spit something random at you. You gonna use this, Julia?
I'm probably gonna use it. I use whatever Netflix gives me, but I have a specific, taste for Netflix videos, so I know what I want. So I usually don't ask for suggestions.
The Netflix shuffle.
Crime drama.
The Netflix shuffle. No relationship to the Cupid shuffle.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, finally, one interesting side effect of the pandemic is that we are experiencing a coin shortage.
So there's so many conspiracies out there about this. So apparently quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, etc. aren't circulating as freely because many shops, of course, were closed during the pandemic, and people don't go to brick and mortar stores. I actually went to Staples the other day on an emergency run, and it was my first time.
Yeah. Oh, what? Yeah, I haven't been to like a physical store in a long, long time, because when you pick up your, restaurant to go order, it's to go. You're not physically in there. And we know that when people are shopping, they prefer to use credit cards, debit cards, contactless payment methods to avoid germs.
Yeah, so now shop owners are resorting to extraordinary measures like traveling across state lines and offering free drinks and sandwiches if customers bring them coins. And even banks are offering bonuses if you turn in your loose change. What a weird world,
I know, what a strange world. I used to take coins to this, machine called Coinstar. Do you remember those?
They gotta be making money like crazy now.
Crazy. And right now, it's a good time if you want to part with your coins altogether. Well,
I got a piggy bank. I have a piggy bank. I actually have two piggy banks. I'm a fan of the piggy bank.
Yeah, do this. Go home.
So my friend's mom is convinced that this is a conspiracy theory, and he's had to give his mom updates on the coin shortage. So evidently where she is in Raleigh, North Carolina, massive coin shortage.
Massive, yeah.
So I wouldn't know. I use credit cards all the time. Part of the problem, folks. So anyway, let's move on to another big issue right now. From coins to schools. One of the biggest concerns right now is, can we open schools safely? Here to talk about the future of our schools is Derrell Bradford. He's the executive vice president of 50 Can. How you doing?
Hey, how are you? Thank you
very
much for having me.
Hi, Derrell. Welcome to the show. Look, what are the bare minimum items that teachers would need to keep everybody safe in schools, and will they have enough of them?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I guess it sort of depends on who you ask. Certainly, the big teachers unions across the country are making a push for PPE, like personal protective equipment. So that's masks and hand sanitizer and that kind of stuff. And then there's also a larger discussion about being able to keep schools clean, which is expensive. They call it deep cleaning. And then what sort of builds on that and complicates everything is like, what does a school or a district do if somebody gets sick? So you've done everything, somebody comes in, tests positive. Like, how much do you shut down for? How long? For how many people? Whatever, that kind of stuff. If you look at all of that and add it up, like at different points of the year, it's had different price tags. In the spring, A lot of folks said, $75 billion would have done it. The first CARES Act gave people like 13. One of the big superintendent associations says it's 250 billion now. Privately, some people say it's $1 trillion. So
$1 trillion, Derrell. Numbers don't mean anything anymore. That's one of the things we've lost sight of during the pandemic. So let's talk about constant testing. So, obviously we've had some testing challenges in this country and across the world, in all fairness. So is that an option for schools, cost-wise and logistics-wise?
Yeah, I think the logistics part of it is the better question, because nobody in the country gets constant testing right now. Like the
people in the White House do, and certain VIPs,
sports teams, also
of course,
way to get to the front of the line. But I waited forever to find out that I had the antibodies, right? So it took me like 5 months, and I've been inside with no coins for 5 months too. So the challenge about this right now is that it's all very political. So there's like legitimate conversations you want to have about people getting tested and all this other stuff and how much that costs. But the moment that the president said we should open schools, half of the states that were planning on opening them said they're not going to open them anymore. And so the discussion has become very polarized. It's become very political. So it's hard to get at like the actionable nuggets of what you should do to get kids back to school and to bring teachers back safely if they want to come back.
So Julia's next question is the one that's the most burning to me.
Yeah, I really want to know that, because with the new academic year, students are going back to class, but a lot of people's classes are going to be online. Some students are fine with online learning, but some people, like myself included, I really want to be in class and have that in-class attention, right? Otherwise, my mind would wander. Do you think we will ever be able to find a happy medium?
Yeah. So there is an upside to this, right? So to your point, I appreciate you had tip into it. Some kids have done really well in this moment. The New York Times had a great piece about this a couple of weeks ago. But obviously there are huge gaps, and there are lots of kids who want to be in person. And I imagine you were a very boisterous student, Julia. But what we should be doing is saying, who needs to be in person? Special needs kids, right? English as a second language kids, a bunch of low-income kids who work better in person. Like, how can we build that option for them? Who doesn't need to be in person, right? Like, who could do online with a tutor, right? Who is perfectly fine virtual? Who's the best operator of virtual, no matter where they are in the country? How can we enroll kids in them? And we should be financing that. The idea for the foreseeable future to me that we're going to get kids in a rhythm in school, like all of them, in person, is kind of a fantasy. I think we can get some people into school and some people not. I think there are people who will do fine not going back to school, and we should help them do that. I think there's some kids who desperately need to be in school, and we should prioritize that. And it's going to be like a multitude of answers, not one simple solution for everything.
Derrell, you make too much sense. I think we're going to have to end it there, because, I think this has become so politicized and lacking in common sense. So thank you for being a refreshing guest and bringing both options on the table. Open for some, virtual for others. Great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Derrell.
Thank you for having me.
That was great.
Yeah, see, it's August. Colleges are back in session, but it's getting complicated because this whole pandemic affects every college and every student differently.
Yeah, so some say this pandemic is a disadvantage for college students. Of course, there are obvious concerns, like universities are closing campuses, like University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. After 9 days?
Yeah,
something
like
really short.
Frats.
Yeah, they opened up, boom, Corona, going completely online.
Yeah, and then when I think there is the obvious disadvantage for learning. Like when I was in school, a lot of my courseworks involved laboratory work.
Of course,
right?
and you can't do that online.
Imagine how to do that online. I have to have access to the laboratory.
Well, for someone less intelligent like me, which was reading, writing, and speaking, and no laboratories, courses online, you have the liberty to learn at your own pace, and this gives you time to truly learn the material. And then if you have free time on top of a remote course load, you could obviously get a side job to help you pay your bills, especially if you're a college student.
One thing one of our producers pointed out correctly, I think, is when you learn online, it's easier to cheat. I mean, I remember when I was in school, we had to, adhere to this honor code. Nobody was really checking, but you can't really cheat.
Honor code was an issue of our time. We're showing our age here.
I know, damn. But it was, not exactly enforceable, but because everybody was together, so you don't really cheat. And right now, if you're going at your own pace, I don't know. I think there's going to be a slew
Testing
of
is definitely an issue, and there's a lot of other unforeseen issues. In fact, going back to school, one of our producers had trouble because with all the uncertainty, it was hard to figure out what classes they were offering, if there was still room in them. When they would come on, they'd fill up immediately. So, the whole idea of, going back to school right now, not easy.
Yeah, one advantage I can think of is right now, if you're looking to fulfill your coursework, get a head start, you can just take a class at your local community college. It's going to be the same class. It's going to be, 10 times cheaper, something like that. So save a lot of money.
Yeah, and some colleges are actually taking the plunge and putting students in a bubble for at least 2 weeks when they arrive on campus. They won't be able to leave their dorms, and they can't dive right into their college experience like they used to. But of course, there's a problem with that.
Yeah, there is a problem with that. I don't know. I sign up for college to, be with my friends, participate in whatever clubs that would have me.
Yeah, and let's be honest, folks. Like, we are social beings. I mean, it's hard to quarantine, and I can't imagine these students are going to stay 2 weeks isolated during their first week of college. Oh my God, I barely slept my first week of college. Yeah. Can you imagine?
I can't imagine.
No, I don't think
in a way, I am fortunate that I'm not in school right now, because personally, I don't want to be dealing with that.
So anyway, talking about the less fortunate who are about to take the plunge and go into college life and are thinking about it, we have Hafeez Lakhani. He's the CEO of Lakhani Coaching. And of course, a friend of Bold. How you doing?
Really nice to see you again.
Hey, good to have you back. Look, a lot of schools are waiving the SAT and ACT requirements this academic year. Will standardized testing become a thing of the past?
It's a great question. I don't expect it to become a thing of the total past, but I do expect the test optional movement to pick up a lot of momentum post-COVID. One thing people need to remember is that test optional is not new. It's been around for, in some cases, 30 years, places like Bowdoin College, really great universities. And University of Chicago is the one really shining example of a really top-tier, equivalent to Ivy League, prestigious university that has been very successful with test optional. That being said, what some people don't know is that if you guys want to guess, what percentage of students do you think still submit testing to universities that are test optional?
91%.
I want to say very high, like above 80%, I would say.
You guys are close, 77%. And this was published, it's been widely published in something called the Defining Access Report that did an in-depth study over 10 years of data from universities that were test optional. I believe it was over 1,000 universities were recorded in this study, a really comprehensive study. And two really important takeaways from that study are the 77% number. And to me, because I work with students on selective admissions, it's important to note, again, do you guys want to guess? Were students who did submit testing accepted at a higher rate, or were students who didn't submit testing accepted at a higher rate?
I imagine the students who submitted testing were accepted at a higher rate.
Acceptance rates were higher in that report for students who did submit testing. So I think it's the perfect option. It's good for society in that let a student decide if his or her testing furthers the application. If your problem-solving ability is an asset and you want it to be considered, great, go ahead and show that excellence and be aware of where the bar is for a given university. And if you think that's not the best way to show your excellence, then take it off the table. In many of these cases, it's almost completely widely accepted now to be test optional for this academic year because of coronavirus, right? And if you take it off the table, be aware that there will be all the more focus on your academics and what I call your character.
So, Hafeez, you help students really shop around for colleges. And one of the new considerations that we have now, right, is that some schools aren't financially stable. Is that part of the process now, if you're someone who's looking at colleges, about the long-term financial sustainability of these institutions?
Sure, it's a valid question. And frankly, we live in a world of the haves and have-nots in many ways, and that applies to colleges as well. So the really kind of large, prestigious colleges, like let's say the Brown universities of the world, the Harvards of the world, as I said, Chicago's of the world, they have big endowments. And the endowments, even though there's a lot of restrictions on what they can use from the endowment on a given year, it is kind of there as a rainy day fund. So if in a year like this, the financial numbers on colleges are horrendous. I've already spoken to CNBC about this. I expect at least 100 colleges not to make it out of this period.
Wow.
And the reason is, if you think about it on the revenue side, let's suppose you're a college that doesn't have a huge endowment and you depend on tuition revenue. So you've announced that your class is going to be completely virtual. Well, guess what? 25%, 30% of students are going to say, hey, I'm taking the year off. I'm going to find other things to do with my time. I'm going to go participate in the election year and do other productive things, and I'll come back next year. Well, that's fine for the students, but the school loses that revenue and they don't really have a way to replace it, right? And yet their overhead, their buildings, their staff, obviously professors, all those costs remain roughly the same, right? So you lose enrollment revenue. International students, not enough people are talking about this, but with all politics aside, the current policies in place, you may have read about the big ICE announcement about a month ago, are basically putting out an unwelcome mat for international students. So for ongoing international students, it's a little bit easier, but for entering international students, first-year undergrads and first-year graduate students, it is a massive obstacle to enroll. And so what some of those people are going to do is say, you know what, I'll stay in Lebanon, I'll stay in China, I'll stay in South Korea, and I don't want to go to the US anymore. And those are tuition dollars that are not showing up at these universities as well. And at the end of the day, if you don't have a rainy day fund, how are you going to plug these financial holes?
Yeah, we're keenly aware of that. And one last thing I do want to ask you, for our viewers like myself who have already left school many years ago, not that long ago, but already graduated, is this a prime time for these, let's say, non-traditional students to take some classes?
Sure. So let's talk about it. You guys were making some really good points, even with the jokes about online education. It's interesting. Online education has never been better than it is now. I know it's a huge inconvenience for a lot of people, and I'll be honest with you, it's not, even though it's never been better, it's still not anywhere near in-person education, right? And I'm not sure it'll officially converge all the way. But that being said, if there are tuition discounts available, and if you've been thinking about, taking some classes or chipping away at a degree, you can rest assured that online education is, in many cases, far, far less expensive than in-person education. Many universities, including a lot of the state universities, they offer online-only degrees that are a fraction, less than half of the cost of a full-time degree or an in-person degree. It's a good opportunity because those courses are getting better and better. The professors are getting more and more experience at delivering a good product online, even if it's not quite what it would be if you were in the peer environment, learning from the brilliance of the people around you.
Well, Hafeez, we always love having you on, so thanks for being a friend of Bold TV, and we'll see you soon.
Great to see you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, see, once students, they graduate college, which is not easy to do anyway, they have
How will they find a job?
Challenge that's so challenging in this environment during the pandemic. Yeah, jobs. A lot of companies, organizations, entities are having this thing. I don't want to say it. Hiring freeze.
Yeah, and it's becoming increasingly harder to people to find work as many companies have, just as Julia said, hiring freezes. And of course, finding a job out of college has never been easy.
Yeah, and right now people are just trying to think outside the box. One of the places that we mentioned on this show is a website called Upwork. You can find freelance gigs, you can find short-term gigs, make a little money on the side while you can. The downside of that is you have international competition, so you can try it.
But it could get you a foot in the door. And remember, folks, the hardest job you'll ever get is your first job.
Yeah, the first job.
And if you're interested in a certain institution, remember, institutions, the hardest part is getting a foot in the door. Once you have a foot in the door, you're done. So if you're looking at a big company, a college, or some sort of big organization, freelance work or even internships might be the best way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, ask for an internship, ask for freelance work, ask for to be an independent contractor, maybe in the state of California.
That's how we've hired people, by the way.
Yeah, and then they turn into really good producers or other professionals.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you can always pair contract work with another part-time job, and that could help pay the bills until the the economy gets better. And as Julia mentioned, look for work on platforms like Upwork and many more. And you can even look on Indeed and LinkedIn. There are a lot of part-time work available. But before you get a job, what do you have to go through, Julia? The interview.
Yeah, the interview. And that is such a daunting thing right now because everything is done on Zoom, and being on Zoom is such a different experience than if you were to step into the room and shake the person's hand.
Yeah, and you can do your homework and make an impression. There's a few tips that you need to know about mastering a Zoom interview, like look at the camera.
Yeah, look at the camera.
Right, exactly. That was one thing we learned a few episodes ago. Yeah, from one of our experts in interview skills. And remember, the Zoom interview may become really the norm because companies are quickly figuring out that offices are expensive and not really needed.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of companies, if they have the ability to go fully remote, they are going fully remote. I mean, not everybody has that luxury. I believe like 67% of the workers have to physically to be at their workplace to do their job. However, the other, 30 whatever percent, they can work from home fully.
And one last thing before we leave it here, always remember to lean on your own personal networks. Most people get jobs because they know someone who knows someone. Of course, go on LinkedIn, go on Indeed, go on Upwork, but don't forget to ask your mom, your dad, your cousin, your neighbor. If they know of anyone looking for work, don't be embarrassed about being out of work. Everyone is down right now, and, embrace the uncertainty.
Ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, ex-whatever. Look.
Your dog walker, doesn't matter. Yeah. Try your best and don't give up.
Yeah. Next, I do want to touch on a rather dreadful topic. I'm not, happy to talk about this.
Let me make sure I don't smile.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about the possibility of another shutdown.
Oh, my God.
In a recent interview, Dr. Anthony Fauci said that if American bands together, the country can avoid another long shutdown, but we're not really banding together.
Maybe some of us are, some of us aren't. And I think if we do avoid another shutdown, it's because we practice common sense. We all know this. We don't have to sit here and preach it. Just do common sense things. One of the funny things about this, Julia, is that I'm actually getting less colds with masks and social distancing and, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think if most Americans just practice common sense, we could possibly avoid another shutdown.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we collectively can handle another shutdown psychologically or economically.
Yeah. And, here in New York, they've been really strict about reopening, which is, praised by public health experts, but our economy has basically collapsed.
Yeah, our unemployment rate close to 20%.
Yeah, which is Great Depression levels. And, places like my home state of Florida have taken another approach to the problem, and they've been reopening and recovering faster economically. Now, we still don't know how many lives were lost because of the reopening, and we really won't know until we look back on the air.
Until we look back. So right now, people are just practicing caution, but, there's always the trade-off. I don't have an answer for it, but for everybody's sake, I hope there is not another shutdown. I just really don't think we can have another shutdown.
Folks, this is super straightforward. The more we open, the more there's an uptick in cases, right? But we can't pretend that the virus is going to disappear, but we also can't pretend that we can live like this forever. Yeah. There are definite costs psychologically and economically, like Julia mentioned, and this is a really sensitive balance. Yeah. So avoid large crowds, wear a mask, and, we can only disrupt our normal lives until we are left jobless and our mental health is damaged.
Yeah.
The question
Which is not where we want to go.
Yeah. So how do we find a happy median? And to be completely frank, folks, I do not envy anyone in power now because these are really tough calls.
Yeah. All right, that's the end of our show.
Thank you all for watching. Follow Bold TV on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Fire TV, Roku, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We'll see you next week.